Do you feel constantly pissed off scrolling through social media? Seeing everyone post their perfect pictures of their perfect families living out their perfect lives? Are you constantly comparing yourself to others because you don't have six-pack abs, you're constantly worried about money, and you live an unfulfilled life at a dead-end job with no room to grow? Do you ever look at the choices that you made with work or your family, wishing you had been better equipped to handle life's challenges? Well, what if I told you that all of these thoughts and feelings you've had are a blessing in disguise? It's a valuable tool you can use to forge a life that you can be proud of. And in today's video, I'll share some tips I've learned in my own life's journey on how to turn your past shortcomings into future opportunities. And by the time you finish this video, hopefully you'll come to realize that at first glance, sometimes success looks a lot like failure. Now, before we dive deeper into this, let's first define what success and failure mean to you. In Earl Nightingale's book, The Strangest Secret, he states that the best definition of success that he's ever been able to find is success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. You know, no matter what goal or dream you have, no matter how big or small it is, as long as you are actively working towards that goal, then you're considered a success. Now, I realize that probably doesn't sit well with many of you, but hear me out on this. You are constantly surrounded by mediocrity at every turn. People with no drive, goals, or ambition, they infiltrate every part of your day, both in person and online. You have been conditioned to believe that success only comes from having a fat bank account or having that Instagram-worthy partner to show off. And I want you to stop that immediately. If you have a dream, if you have a goal, don't let anyone belittle your path. You're considered a success when you have a goal and work towards that goal. And if you're not working towards that goal, then you're a failure. It's that simple. Except it kind of isn't. Remember how I said that sometimes success can look a lot like failure? Well, that's because failure doesn't have to be permanent. In the entirety of human history, it's dotted with failure. And with every failure, a lesson was learned which directly or indirectly led to someone else's measure of success. Let's discuss some tips I've learned from my own failures. Number one, acknowledge your weaknesses and attack them. Here's a scenario for you. Have you ever been in a group and felt like making everyone feel uncomfortable? I know I do all the time. Well, if you ever find yourself in this rare situation, then here's a way to make your dreams come true. Ask everyone in the group to list out what they're bad at and how they would go about fixing it. Now, most people can't or won't acknowledge that they have any flaws, and this is especially true online. Everyone always wants to present the best version of themselves, especially on social media. Now, I'm not suggesting that you go about life being self-deprecating, but you should be self-aware of all your shortcomings and flaws. It's understandable if you find yourself struggling with coming up with anything because we all like to think that we're amazing at all times with no flaws. The reality is no one is perfect, and this includes you. In fact, you've probably done the first part of this exercise without even realizing it. Anytime you say things like, well, she looks good, or his muscles are big, or man, they really crushed it at work today, you are subconsciously comparing yourself to others and admitting some shortcomings you have when compared to them. For me, I've always struggled with being a slow learner. I didn't have good study habits growing up, and school just kind of came naturally for me. So by the time I reached college, all that lack of understanding of how to properly absorb and retain information, well, it finally caught up to me. I failed a number of classes. I failed a lot of classes. I changed my major twice, and I barely graduated. Finding that first job out of school was extremely difficult, but once I found it, I promised myself I would become a better student and never, ever stop learning. I decided to learn different study techniques, and I developed my own systems at work to help me to retain information better than even my peers. Now, had I been armed with the knowledge on how to properly study back in college, well, my life would have turned out drastically different. It's possible that the struggle of college is what helped me to do well for myself later in life. I needed that struggle, and I'm glad for it. I had to have it to fully appreciate how a well-developed system of information management could elevate my life and career. In short, I turned my shortcomings, my failures, into success. Pick whatever flaw pains you the most, then work daily on attacking it. Every move of the needle in the journey of attacking your biggest flaws or failures is yet another addition to the success pile. This step, the first step, is going to be the hardest. But after that, you can ride this momentum to even greater success. Number two, crazy and failure look the same to most people. When you have clear goals, dreams, or a vision for your future, you decide to make a plan and then you execute. Now here's the problem. Because most people don't even make it to the planning phase of their goals, by the time you make it to the execution phase, they look at you like you're crazy. Defying convention and social norms won't make others look at you in a positive light. They'll be envious of you for following through with your intentions. They'll be upset with you for defying common logic. How dare you do that thing that I could very well do myself, but I don't have the drive, knowledge, and or courage to do myself. People want you to color within the lines and to walk the path traveled by those before you. If you take a chance and deviate from the path, you become a living embodiment that everything they have believed up until that point is potentially wrong. For example, I did my career backwards. Most people who take up the military as a full-time career dream of the day they can get out and join the civilian workforce, but I did the exact opposite. I had a great career as a mechanical engineer and project manager on the civilian side. However, despite what conventional wisdom would say, I decided to transition my, at the time, part-time military career into my current full-time one. Now, this seemed crazy to a lot of people I knew both on the civilian and military side. I even had people I used to call my friends express how they didn't understand why I would take up the military as a full-time career, especially when I had a well-paying civilian career. To them, I looked like I was a failure because I had peaked in my civilian career and couldn't rise any higher. That's why I went military full-time, because I couldn't progress anymore on the civilian side. Now, regardless of what they thought, I made the jump and I couldn't be happier with my decision. Conventional wisdom would indicate that life as a full-time military service member is terrible and is horrible for your family. But for me, the exact opposite has been true. And furthermore, this has helped me to grow in ways I never imagined. Now, did friends and family think I was crazy for making this change? Yeah, hell yeah, they did. But what they failed to see was the growth potential in my decision. Just because others may see your dreams, goals, and decisions as crazy doesn't mean that you shouldn't move forward. Every great person that has ever lived was initially labeled crazy until they weren't. Number 3, make your own unfair advantages. Now, if you spent any time on YouTube in the last 2 years or so, you've probably come across the term unfair advantages. Now, what is that? An unfair advantage is a skill you have that is your unique talent. But here's the thing. What if you don't have an unfair advantage? What if you don't have any talents? Well, first of all, I'm gonna call you a liar because everyone has unfair advantages. But for the sake of argument, let's assume you just can't come up with anything. In that case, my advice to you would be to break the mold and try something new. The most common way we like to think of unfair advantages comes from being born into money or being born into a privileged and well-connected family. On the surface, this is pretty spot on, I get it, but there are many other ways that you can have your unfair advantages. The city or country you're born in, the demographics of the people you grew up around, the skills you learned growing up, these are all your unfair advantages. So, okay, fine. I've said all that and you still don't believe me. You are still convinced that you have no talent, nothing to offer, and no unfair advantages. Well, then your next course of action seems to be pretty simple. Go outside of your comfort zone. Humans are capable of learning and adapting quickly when we are faced with adversity. You may have heard this called the fight or flight mentality. It doesn't matter if that adversity is internal or external. What matters is that you have to trigger your mind and body into working harder than it did the day before. When I felt like my civilian career was stagnating, I realized I had to shake things up and make a change. I talked to my wife and we decided I should volunteer to deploy overseas with the Army National Guard. Yes, I know this sounds a bit extreme. I chose to leave my family for over a year just so I could find myself. When you say it like that, it does sound kind of insane, but big change tends to yield big results. And you know what? I found those big results I was looking for. That deployment forced me into situations I never could have imagined. It taught me skills I didn't have before. I didn't return home the same. I honed my skills as a leader. I tightened up my shot group as a mentor, and believe it or not, it taught me the value of marriage and brought me and my wife closer together. That deployment was a major turning point in my life, and it gave me the unfair advantages I needed to start this channel. It's a huge part of the reason I'm speaking to you now. You don't need to do anything as extreme as going to a potential war zone to find yourself, but there are opportunities all around you to develop your unfair advantages. Now, these tips, for whatever it's worth, were learned by me the hard way. I didn't learn them in a book. I didn't read some case study. They were earned through tears and effort. And my hope is that for you, after implementing these tips, you will notice a significant improvement in your personal and your professional life. You will transform into a person who lives outside of the social norms. But fair warning, until you find any measure of success along your journey, you will be labeled as a failure. Someone who is doing nothing but chasing a pipe dream. Don't pay these people any attention. Don't give any of these negative people any reason to doubt you and what you want out of life. Remember, you're only a failure if you're not constantly working towards your goal. No matter how small or big your goal is, just keep moving forward. Over the years, I've tasted defeat more times than I can count. Every single time it hurt, some more than others, but they all hurt. Every piece of paper, every award that I've ever received as an acknowledgement of my achievements, I can also attach to a failure. It wasn't until I started to implement the tips that we just outlined that I began to understand that these failures were actually nothing more than a lesson for me on my path to personal success. I needed that struggle in studying to help me to become the educated person I am today. I had to take the leap from civilian to soldier to build a better life for my family. And if I hadn't volunteered to deploy with the Army, I never would have built the foundation of unfair advantages that I get to enjoy today and you get to enjoy by watching this video right now. And once you can accept that your failures of yesterday can lead to success today, your quality of life will begin to improve dramatically. Now, I hope that by putting my vulnerabilities on display for the entirety of the internet to see, that I've inspired at least one of you to realize your story isn't as bad as you think. You are equipped with all the tools needed to pull away from the pack and to build your own path. I hope this video was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you all next time.